Well, hello. Thanks for coming back to check out another video. So, we are here today to sit down and talk about, would I repurchase these 10 randomly selected eyeshadow palettes? Maybe that's not the title exactly, but you get the point. So I want to first say that I saw this idea from Annette, Annette's Makeup Corner, so I will link her down below. She's done this video a few times on her channel, but I'll try to at least link one of her videos in the description box as well for you guys. I'm sure there are tons of other people who have also done this, like it's such a good idea. But anyway, how she does it, I think, is that she just herself goes through her palette drawers and just kind of like picks out 10 palettes and then sits down and talks about them, talks you through them, like, would I repurchase these if these were, you know, available to be repurchased today? So I really wanted to do that, but I did not myself want to pick out the 10 eyeshadow palettes. So I actually had my husband, he's such a trooper, I had him sit down and go through my palette drawers, and he picked out the 10 eyeshadow palettes for me. So he did do it randomly. However, he did pick out some palettes that are from the same brand. So I grouped them together by brand so that I could easily like break this up, put in the timestamps and everything like that for you guys. So I hope you are really excited for this. I am. I had a lot of fun like looking through these and thinking like, are these palettes that I would actually repurchase? There were two things that I did not let him pick out though. So any palette that I have like made disjointed and like kind of made into my own. So for instance, my ColourPop Lust for Dusk palette was off limits because I have popped out a few shades of that and replaced them with some of the shadows from the Sailor Moon palette that I decluttered. So I just didn't feel like that was right because that's a palette where like I've messed with it and it's not like true to how it looked like if you bought it. And then the other thing was I didn't tell him like, oh, that palette's discontinued, like you can't pick that. So some of these are discontinued. So even though they're not on the market still available, like we're just gonna have fun with this and just pretend that everything would be available to like repurchase, you know? I just didn't wanna make it too hard on him. But yeah, if that all sounds interesting to you, I'm gonna grab the palettes and we are gonna get right on into this. All right, so he did pick out two palettes from Natasha Denona, and let me say, we're starting off salty. So the first one that he picked out, it's a reflective like packaging, so I'm just gonna show it to you opened up. This is the Natasha Denona Glam Face Palette. I have mine in the dark version, not the light version, and I have to say, I would not repurchase this palette if you gave me that option today. I absolutely love the two cream like face products that you get in here. You get a cream blush and a cream highlighter, both very pretty, very pigmented, easy to blend out and work with. And the shadows in here, they're very like neutral leaning, as you can see like on the screen. I'm trying not to blind you with the glare. They're the same great Natasha Denona quality. Like I don't have any issues with them. I think that they're very pretty, especially the two shimmer shades that you get in here. They're really impactful and great on your lids. However, I'm just not, anytime that I reach for this palette, I'm specifically like more often reaching for the two face palette or the face products, not the eyeshadows so much. I did, when I bought this, went in knowing like this is probably going to be a companion palette, and I think that it would really fit the bill for that. However, I have just been way more into colorful looks and not so much neutral looks. I know today's eye look would suggest otherwise. I feel like every time I say that to you guys, I'm wearing like a neutral eye look, but you can go back and look through previous videos and see that I have been rocking a lot of color. So either way, it's just not something that I'm reaching for. It's not a regret purchase. It's not leaving my collection, but it's not something that I would repurchase today. Okay, so the second one, you guys know right off the bat what I'm gonna say once you see it. The Natasha Denona Love Palette. Now let me do say, my color story is different from your color story if you own this palette because I did rearrange mine. However, I felt like this one was fair game because I still have all of the original shadows within this palette. None of these are like from a different palette or anything like that. So even though it's a rearranged color story, I felt like it was fair to still include in this video, like I didn't mess with it too much, you know? But either way, this is a palette that I would not repurchase either. Like both of my Natasha Denona palettes that he picked out, would not repurchase. Shocking. Anyway, this one boils down to the fact that I just feel like within my collection, and even when I look at the palettes that Natasha Denona has come out with, I feel like this one is just a very bland color story. It's a very safe color story, which I feel weird saying because she does have some more neutral leaning palettes. Like she has the Glam palette, which is like cool tone neutrals. She has the Bronze palette, which is more like warm tone neutrals. And then I think she has like the Biba. But either way, even with those 3 neutral palettes, I feel like the color stories are a bit more inspiring than what you get from this one. It's just a lot of pinks and purples. And I just feel like it was kind of like a safe release for like a Valentine's Day collection. I got this on sale at Sephora, and I think that was the biggest reason why I picked it up, because I was like, ooh, it's Natasha Denona, and I can get it for half off, but I didn't really need it. I have managed to use this palette twice, so you guys will be happy about that. I can say it's the same great Natasha Denona like quality and formula. It's just something that doesn't really get my creative juices flowing, so that's why it would not be a repurchase for me. Okay, so palette number 3 that he picked out comes from Adept Cosmetics. This is Heather Austin's palette that she did in collaboration with them. I think, again, you guys know this is an easy one. Would repurchase. I have absolutely fallen in love with this. Now, this was my first time using Adept Cosmetics. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I really love Heather Austin, and I think she has such a great eye for color combinations as well as like good shimmer shades. So the formula of this is really great. The matte shadows are more on the tightly pressed side, so you don't get a lot of kick up, you don't have a lot of fallout on your face. They're very easy to work with and easy to blend out, even like the darker ones. So I always feel like with some brands, with their formulas, the darker their shadows get, the like more tricky it is to work with their matte formula, but not in the case of Adept. The shimmer formula in here is really nice. I will say it was a little interesting the first time I used it because the shimmer formula has more of like a putty texture. It's not as soft as like a Super Shock shadow from ColourPop, for instance, but it definitely has a lot of give to it. Like it's more malleable than a standard shimmer would be. However, if you just use like a very like tightly packed brush, like I guess a dense brush is what I'm trying to say, you can easily pick up the product and apply it to your eyes. These shimmer shadows are so beautiful like on their own as standalone shimmer shades, but if you use your finger, I have found that I have been able to successfully go in using my finger and taken Passport, 0603, Austin, and I think that was it actually, just those 3. But I've been able to successfully use them as topper shadows, and that's been really fun and helps to like transform eye looks, get your creative juices flowing, like get more use out of your palettes. So yeah, this is definitely like a fan favorite palette for me within my household, and I am saying that I would repurchase this one. Okay, so the next palette comes from ColourPop. This is the Sonic Bloom palette. I'm going to apologize because the background of this is super reflective, but maybe if I hold it right here, you get like a pretty good idea and it doesn't like blind you. So anyway, I went back and forth on this one. I will say these bottom 2 rows I absolutely love. I think that the shimmers in here, this like whole middle row is all shimmers. They are all so pretty, so vibrant, and so impactful. And then these darker mattes down here, I absolutely love. Like this, the bottom 2 rows are like a fall dream to me. And this is the great ColourPop formula. It's not like their kind of iffy formula where some shades are good and some shades aren't. This is really a standout palette. However, this top row right here, it's a lot of samey, and I feel like ColourPop does that a lot within their eyeshadow palette. I really wish they would stop giving us so many like light browns, mid-tone browns, you know? They only usually add in 1 dark brown, which is good, so let's do that with the other brown shades. But yeah, like these 2 in the middle, just super samey. And then this first shadow is a matte shadow that has glitter in it, and I understand like sometimes adding the glitter helps to blend out that color a bit better, but you guys can see this is just like a standard matte cream shade. Why did this need glitter in it? It didn't. I just don't enjoy that particular type of formula. So in saying all of that, you're probably going to be surprised. This is a palette that I would actually repurchase because as a whole, there's only really 4, actually 3, because this shimmer shade up here is really pretty. There's only 3 shadows in this whole palette where I'm like, I could do without that. Like I didn't need those. Like it's a lot of repetitiveness. The rest of the palette though is really nice and lovely, and so that kind of pushes it over the edge, at least for me, into the I would repurchase this category. Okay, so the next palette that he picked out comes from Drizzle Cosmetics. This is their Frosty Flamingo palette. As far as I know, this is still like on their website available for purchase. You do get a mirror in here that I probably just blinded you with, But either way, this is what this palette looks like. This was my first experience trying out Sugar Drizzle as a brand, and I have to say, I fell in love with them. We share the same hometown. But anyway, this is such a great palette. I really feel like the mattes in here are easy to work with, easy to blend out, and they are on the darker side. So again, like I referenced earlier, I feel like sometimes for some brands, that's just a harder formula to get down, but not with them. I feel like theirs are never patchy, like they blend out very easily. I'm able to layer and build them up. It's quite lovely formula. The shimmer shadows in here are like the star of the show though, especially this multi-chrome shade down here, Pinkaberry. This is hands down probably my favorite multi-chrome like within my collection. Hopefully you can see like the shift of that. I will swatch it out on my hand, just in case. But either way, it is such a fun shadow to play around with and work with. Like I think that the whole palette is honestly kind of worth it just for that shade, even though I do still really love the rest of the palette. So either way, this is just a 9-pan palette, and you can see from looking at it, like it's very pink, purple heavy. So you would think like, well, you said that you wouldn't repurchase the Love palette, and that has more shades and it's pink and purple heavy. But I feel like just with the undertones of this particular palette, you can do so much more with this. And I feel like, again, it is with the shimmer shades that really make this palette unique, and it has like a bunch of variety to offer. Like this isn't just a typical one-trick pony kind of more monochromatic palette that I feel like some brands do release. So yeah, really do enjoy this one, and it would be a repurchase. Okay, so the next palette that we will talk about comes from Menagerie. This is the Whalesong palette. I think this one has been discontinued, but I'm not quite sure. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Menagerie is also doing a formula update. So either way, this is what the Whalesong looks like. This is a really pretty like green blue color story. I do have to give them that. And I do really like the Menagerie shimmer formula. I feel like the shimmer shadows that you get in here are quite lovely. There's only 4 of them though, so this is a very matte heavy palette. You got this white shimmer, this kind of green shimmer, this darker green shimmer, and then this blue shimmer. I have to say my favorite one, surprisingly, is the blue shimmer out of this palette. This would not be a repurchase for me though, simply because the matte shadows in here. And like I said, this is a very much kind of all matte palette almost. So some of these darker matte shades like Barnacle here, Breaching, and Bubble Net, like these 3 right in this kind of little corner, I feel like those are really hard shadows to work with. When I do use them, I have to be so careful to not over blend and make these shadows patchy. They don't build and layer nicely. And then 2, with those 3 shadows in particular, they do stain my eyelids. So normally I don't have a problem with that, because when I go in and do like my cleanse, like I'll use my cleansing balm, that gets off majority of my eye makeup. And then sometimes I do have a little bit of staining, especially like I notice it more often than not with like hot pink type shadows. So anyway, then I will go in with like my cellar water, and I'm able to easily remove like that leftover staining residue, no issues. But not with this. I take my micellar water and it's still there. I will go back in with my cleansing balm and it's still there. Like it takes a good 2-ish days of like, you know, taking off your makeup brain fog. It takes a good 2 days to actually get these blue shadows off of my lids. So it's just a bit fussy. I absolutely love the Killer Purr palette that I have from them. And I do still, like this one does still have a place. Like overall it is a good palette, but just if you gave me the option to repurchase this today, I wouldn't. Like it just has more cons to it than it does pros. All right, let's talk about some BH Cosmetics. He picked out 2 BH Cosmetics palettes. So the first one comes from their Sweet Shop collection. This is the Bubblegum palette. I will open this up for you guys. All right, I'm just gonna tell you right off the bat, this is a repurchase palette. This is my absolute hands down favorite blue monochromatic palette within my collection. I really only have, because I decluttered my ColourPop ones because I loved this one more. So I really only have that Menagerie one that is like so blue heavy, as well as this one. Hands down favorite one. The shimmer formula in here is just so pretty, so stunning, as well as the matte formula. I absolutely love that this palette goes from really light to really dark. And I feel like there is a good mix of different kinds of blues within this palette. So even though this is a monochromatic palette, much like I said with the Sugar Drizzle palette, I feel like there's just a lot that you can do with this and have a lot of variety, a lot of creativity. Now granted, yes, all of your looks are going to be blue, but there will be like differences to them to where I don't feel like creatively you will be stunted, you know? And then the other pro to this palette, I will say these darker matte blue shades here, I don't experience that staining issue that I have with the Menagerie palette. So again, it's just a win-win all around and a favorite palette. Okay, so our next BH palette is the BH Cosmetics Smitten in Switzerland palette. Now mine has the old packaging. I always like to point that out because I saw this palette once at a TJ Maxx in the newer updated packaging, and I just opened it up just to look at it. Now they did not rearrange the color story, but they did change some of the shade names, which I thought was weird. But either way, this is what this palette looks like on the inside. I will say this is one of my favorite palettes. It's like, I consider this one a neutral palette, but if you are a neutral lover who is afraid of color, this is one of those great palettes to pick up and try out because you get some fun pops of color in here while it gives you an all over like neutral vibe. I also really appreciate that within this palette, you get a good mix of like cooler tones and warmer tones. That is not a like pairing that I would have done like in previous years, but now that I have a few more palettes in my life that do have cooler tones as well as warmer tones, I really do enjoy mixing and matching and like just playing around with that. The BH Cosmetics formula, as you guys know, is like one of my hands down favorite all-time drugstore formulas. I will say the only con to this palette is that this top row here, now I have finished off this slope shade, that was like a matte gray shade. But these three shadows here, Snowcap, Montreux, and Fondue, all of those, even though they might in the pan look different, like a kind of white shade, and then it has like the gradient, like gets darker, on your lids, on my skin tone, these all look the same. Like I could use all three of those as a shadow to like just set down my eyeshadow primer and move on about my day. So I feel like that it wasn't necessary that we had all three of those shadows in this palette. But in saying all of that, it's no surprise, it's BH Cosmetics. Of course I would repurchase this. So I just, like I said, they are my favorite drugstore company. I'm super excited. Saw that they're sneak peeking some more travel palettes to be released this summer. But I'm also like super nervous because as we all know, Makeup Revolution bought them out. So, all right, the next palette that we will talk about comes from Nomad Cosmetics. This is the America's Parks palette. So this palette is really fun, really lovely. I grew up with the Blue Ridge Parkway as my backyard. So I feel just kind of like a hometown connection to this. You know what I mean? There is a shadow in here, Blue Ridge Parkway. It is this matte green shade. Either way, really pretty color story. I really like the just whole theming of this palette. You know, like I think that it goes really well. The color selection goes really well with the theming is what I'm trying to say. However, the darker matte shadows in here, so specifically this purple, this brown, and this red, they are all a little bit on the more fussy side to work with. They do not like, they're not as dark in the pan on your eyes. You cannot easily build them up. They can become a bit patchy if you over blend them. I just don't really enjoy working with them. And then this whole middle row of shimmers right here, they are not impactful. They are like soft shimmers. Like if you are someone who sees some of these like indie brands or even some of the more mainstream brands, like I feel like for instance Natasha Denona has a really impactful shimmer formula. BH Cosmetics has a really impactful shimmer formula. If you see those and you're like, no, that is not the life that I want to live, Nomad might be up your alley because their shimmer shadows are just that more, like I said, softer. There's no really other good way to explain it. And it's just not a formula for me. I don't enjoy that. I want my shimmers to be like bam, in your face, punchy, and impactful. So in saying all of that, you probably can guess, this would not be a repurchase palette for me. I just don't enjoy Nomad's formula. But like I said, none of these, maybe I didn't say it, but none of these palettes are like actually leaving my collection. This is just a fun, would I repurchase them video. So this one, unfortunately, no, I would not repurchase. Okay, so the last palette to talk about is an oldie, but kind of a goodie. So So this is the LORAC Mega Pro 1. I actually owned this years ago, and I panned a bunch of shadows out of it. I think this was one year where I did a pan that palette. I didn't finish it. I think I quit 6 months into it, and I depotted the palette and put them all into like a magnetic palette. My mom fell in love with that magnetic palette, so she took it, but then she threw it away. It's okay. So then she repurchased the palette for herself, but she said after she got it and started playing around with it, she didn't like it, so she passed it on to me. So that is how I now own this again within my collection. I will say, once she ordered it and it got to her, the two shades down here, Indigo and Caviar, were completely shattered, so she just dug those out. But either way, this is a straight up neutral palette, and Haley of like 2-3 years ago would have been like, yes, I will repurchase this. But Haley here today would not repurchase this, surprisingly, and you guys know I am a LORAC kind of girl. So anyway, this, like I said, is a completely neutral palette, and I have to say, hold on, I have a hair. Okay, I absolutely hate it when your hair gets stuck in your lip gloss, but anyway, this is a neutral palette, like I was saying, and you guys have probably heard me say time and time again that the Blend Bunny Dollhouse palette is really the only neutral palette that I actually need in my collection. I just adore that palette so much, and it does offer a better color story than this one, because again, like with some of these palettes that we've already talked about, a lot of the shadows within this palette are samey. Like you didn't need so many different browns or so many light shimmers, you know? I will also say that the shimmer formula of this style of LORAC palettes is more impactful than the Nomad formula. However, LORAC has like revamped their formula, and their new shimmer formula is way more impactful than what you will get with these shimmers. So I do enjoy their new formula better than their old formula. But so yeah, at the end of the day, this is a palette that I wouldn't end up repurchasing simply for those reasons. But like I said, this kind of like has some nostalgia to it for me. Like, I don't know, I have such fond memories of like panning this. So when my mom gave it to me, I was like, well, of course I'll take it. And I have been using it and playing around with it, and I have enjoyed the looks that I make. But like I said, it's just not something I would repurchase. So that wraps it up for this very long-winded video. Those are all 10 randomly selected palettes. Would I or would I not repurchase them if I had to today? I really had so much fun filming this. I think I might have him do this again in like a month or two and pick out 10 different, like 10 new palettes. So let me know down below if you're up for seeing a round 2 of this. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts and opinions, because I always think that that's really fun too, just getting to talk to you guys. So again, I appreciate you for sticking around till the end. I hope you're having a good day, a good night, or a good whatever, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.